As dads, some days we feel like we have all the answers, and some days we feel like we don't have a clue. If that describes you, you're at the right place. This is the All Pro Dad Podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Ted Lowe, and each week on the All Pro Dad Podcast, we ask just one question. We explore the answer, talk about what we've gotten wrong, and sometimes what we've gotten right. We talk about what the experts say, and then at the end of every episode, we give you just one simple but powerful pro move of the week. Mm-hmm. Today, I'm joined by two other dads who describe themselves like me as just slightly above average, Mr. Buck Buchanan, Mr. Bobby Lewis.
What's going on?
You guys, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, man. Thanks for having us.
I love this. Bobby, what is our question of the week?
Question of the week. How can I stop being so controlling with my kid? And I'm actually wondering with you guys, like when you were little Ted, little Buck, if your dad had a remote control and he could push one little button and control something about you, what would it have been?
Mute.
That's enough of that guy.
That'd be enough of that one. That's a good one. My dad was always like, what were you thinking? Like I had ADHD before they knew what was to call it. And so I was so impulsive. I would just do things like he was probably, yanking me out of the way of traffic, like way too long. I was way too old. He would grab me by the arm a lot. Like, what are you doing? Like pulling me back, keeping me safe. So not like toddler age. I'm like 17.
He's hitting the settings button.
Yeah, he's the setting is make this child less impulsive. Yeah. Pause this child.
Well, what about now? You guys both have kids, wide range of ages. What button do you want to hit with your kids now?
I would hit the Spanish button just to see what happens.
Just to see what happens.
Just to see how a little redheaded kid speaking in Spanish would be.
Yeah.
Probably, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, with four, they're also different. I think kind of the heart of this episode, this was from an article that I've written, All Pro Dad. I think for me, I don't think I would push a button anymore because it was such my tendency to be controlling. In fact, this is one of those things, if I could go back, and I feel like I say this a lot on the podcast, but if I could go back and say, hey, listen, here's the reality when it comes to controlling your children. You cannot.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that message.
Very sad.
It is very sad. And I go all the way back to our oldest son. Like he was being very particular, like 18 months old about what he would eat. He would just refuse to eat. The pediatrician said to us, hey, if he gets hungry enough, he'll eat, which is a logical thing.
Yeah.
We started with lunch one day with it. He didn't want it. We gave it to him, tried to give it for dinner. He wouldn't eat it, 18 months old. And we're dying. You put down an 18-month-old with thing? And the doctor was like, yes. The next morning, breakfast, refuses to eat it. Lunch, refuses to eat it. And then I went, I'm out. And I think it's one of those moments, and I'm fully convinced, knowing his personality now, he would still not have eaten because it is one of those things to this thing. And I used to think it was like physical things. You can't make a kid eat. You can't make a kid do what. You really cannot control a kid. So what can you control? Because when you're trying to be controlling, and I know this is true for me, and this is just research-wise, when you're controlling, you tend to be more angry and more reactive. So what is a better solution? Because here's what we're not seeing. We're not saying, hey, you can't control your kids, so good luck with that. Don't parent. We're not saying that, but I just think it needs to be acknowledged from the very beginning.
And I think there could be a thing that we need to differentiate between what it means to have control of, like, you can't control your kid, meaning you can't control what they do, what they say all the time, because that's not going to make a healthy kid. But what you can control are the environments that you bring your kid in, or controlling the parameters of those environments and things like that. I think that's more of what we're kind of getting at.
And I think the heart of it is only thing you can really control, not even their environments, is yourself. Yeah. So based on that, what are some things that we can control about ourselves? I think the first thing we got to think through is know your triggers when you tend to be controlling. Like, when is that time where you're like, boy, that reaction did not just match the situation? Mm-hmm. When are those times? For me, it's whenever I would ask our kids to do chores around the house, and I can still feel this today, and I don't get like, gee, Dad, you betcha.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it sounds so fun.
I love to sweep.
Huzzah.
Yeah. Huzzah. I grew up on a farm, so you worked. And so when my kids complain or have this look on their face that I want them to mow the grass or whatever, it pushes a button in me. And so I've had to learn that's a trigger with me. And because it's a trigger with me, it makes me controlling and it makes me respond in a way I'm not proud of.
You're talking about food and dinner and getting your kids to eat. Our 4-year-old done the same thing, just refused to eat. And eventually I was like, all right, well, I'm not making you something else. Like, this is what we made for dinner. I don't care if you want a peanut butter sandwich. I made this for dinner. So like, this is dinner. I'm not making 2 dinners. And if you don't want to eat it, you don't want to eat it, and then she'll eventually eat it. But like this happened to me yesterday. Like my son had gotten in trouble, went into his room, sat him down face to face, edge of the bed, had this great conversation. Son, hey, thank you. We connected heart to heart. Now it's time for dinner.
Like Disney moment.
Yeah. Like the music was playing. I felt like Carl Winslow, man. It was amazing. Yes. And we get up and we're walking out of the room and I said, it's time for dinner. He leaves his bed. He takes 6 steps, turns around, climbs back over the bed and lays down again. As I'm exiting the room, and I turned and I went, it's time for dinner. And in that moment, I was like, I have no control over this child. I was feeling so good. And then I realized he didn't have to do a darn thing he doesn't want to do. And, it's weird because I wanted to control. I was like, man, I have mastered this parenting thing. And then within about 2 seconds, I realized I know nothing.
Or kind of that feeling of like when your kid starts crying because they're in trouble and you want to tell them like, stop crying. No, you can't cry right now. Yeah, and it's like
that's my trigger is the disobedience. Yeah. Like when I asked you to do something, and I'm not asking you to do something like you don't want to do, like I don't want to mow the lawn. It's let's go eat dinner, and he's like, no, I'm not. I'm laying back in this bed. I'm like, this is the trigger for me. It's like I asked you to do something. It wasn't for your harm. It was for your good. Like, let's go so I can nourish you so you're here tomorrow.
It also wasn't up for debate.
No, it was. Yeah, that's
so. When your children being illogical,
oh man,
that is the trigger.
Yeah,
that's a trigger
for sure.
Another one is be realistic. Like, be realistic with because when we're unrealistic of what we think our kids need to be doing or should be doing at a certain age, at a certain stage. Our oldest son was so great with people skills. He was around adults, all the time when he was little, and he could look adults in the face and have adult conversations at a very young age. And his brother's a different kid. And so his brother would not just be shy, he would be disrespectful. Yeah. And so I had this expectation, and I don't feel like I did this a lot with my kids, but I did have this expectation of respect for adults. You're in this home, you're going to respect adults. And so that was a huge value for me. And so when he would not live up to that, I was like, well, you need to be able to do this. And I thought, I think if I'd been more realistic to go, wait a minute, kids are wired very differently. He's going to get there differently. It's going to be a slower route. I just wasn't realistic with what he could do at that age because his brother had done it so much earlier. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think we kind of run into the same thing with our 2 boys. And, Carter, he was just hitting markers a lot quicker. And then his brother is not, but like, that doesn't mean that his brother's doing anything wrong. Yeah. He truly is just a different kid. He's going to process the same situation that they're both in way differently. Mm-hmm. And that's been a learning point for me is what are the realistic expectations that I can have for each kid? Mm. And oftentimes, almost every time, they're completely different. Mm. And it's tough.
That's a great point.
Because it's like I almost have to put a switch in my brain for which kid I'm talking to, and good. So I'm looking at, the oldest one and I'm like, click. And then I can talk to him. And then I look at the other one without clicking and I'm like, okay. And he's like,
age, stage, personality.
Right. And it's they're 2 completely individual people, even though we tend to lump them together as my children. Mm. You know what I'm saying? And so,
like what's realistic for this kid with this personality at this stage.
I think it's, being realistic is having those overarching things that these are what my children do. These are my expectations for my children. And then I have to have almost like subcategories of this is my expectation for Carter. This is my expectation for Fletcher. That all live with under that big umbrella of my expectations for my children in general. But I have to look at both of them and be realistic,
Right.
So,
and I think as you're talking about that, I was thinking like we have these huge values for our kids, right? Like I think we all have these things. Hey, this is a non-negotiable for me. Like, you're going to work hard or whatever that is for you. All of a sudden that can make us really controlling too, right? Like that can make us, I've got this expectation that in our house we do X, Y, Z. So that can get tricky.
Well, and I think we a lot of our expectations over the years, my wife and I have kind of shifted this, I think, to be a little bit more healthy. We've tried to set a lot of our hard expectations to be related to our faith and to be biblical for us. Like even things that seem like no-brainers, but they need reminders of who are you when you leave this house? Well, first off, I'm a child of God. Second, I'm a Buchanan. And if you're doing something that's going to disrespect either one of those two in that order, don't do that. Stop doing it. That to me, that is a realistic expectation that I can put on both of them. And are they succeeding at it? Not at all. Am I succeeding at it? Most of the time, not, but it's a standard that, we're all kind of growing towards. And I guess that's part of being realistic is be forgiving and show grace because I need it to.
Yep.
So.
Some days it's not going to look like either of those things. Yeah. Right. Right.
Because newsflash, we might be saying you need to do these. We're saying this to ourselves too.
Absolutely.
I'm saying to myself, be realistic,
So this is every episode, right? I hope people hear that every episode going, the whole all pro dad thing. I'm just like, somebody said to me the other day, oh, so you're a professional dad now? I was like, no, that is not what we're saying. We're on the struggle bus with you. We're just trying to be.
I want to be.
I want to be. It's not going to happen. One of the things that I wish I'd have done more with my kids and I'm trying to do better with now is to communicate choices versus control. Like if you say, hey, you can choose not to act like a Buchanan today, but if you do, here's the consequence. Yeah. You can choose to be disrespectful to your mother, but if you do, that's the consequence. Because when we adopted our 9-year-old, I remember my rule was nobody in my house disrespects my wife. And so I said that to the counselor and I said, this is one of our rules. And she goes, good luck with that. And I was like, well, wait a minute. This is one of my rules. She said, it may be one of your rules or one of your expectations, but she can choose to be disrespectful. What you do with that choice, she said, but make no mistake about it. You can't reprogram a child from 9 years. And she goes, the reality, you can't even make your bio kids do that. So I think it's a thing of saying, if you choose to say unkind things to your sister, your consequences will be to do something, for her by doing her chores. Or if you choose to pick up your toys about 8, you'll get to stay up 30 extra minutes. Since you chose to be disrespectful to your mom, you'll need to write her a letter apologizing, but it's connecting those things. The goal of communication to your kid that choices come with consequences, both good and bad. And all of a sudden you can let your hand off a wheel that you can't drive.
Yeah. What we do in our house is we give them outcome options. And then they become in control of the situation. We're still going to get to the same outcome. So we have in our house, we have this designated playroom where they got all their toys and their Legos and all this, the stuff you can step on that hurts. And so we say, all right, you go into that room and you have to clean this up before your, play date or whatever you're going on later. Right. It's like, you can do it now or you can do it later. The outcome's the same. Like we're still getting the room clean, but I've given you the power now to decide when you're going to do it. Like
but by the end of the night, this room will be clean.
Or we're just not going to go. Like I want you to go. I'd love for you to hang out with your friends. It's going to be a really cool thing. We're going to the park. It's going to be great. But in order for that to happen, this one thing has to happen first. Now you're in control of it. You can do it now or you can do it later on. And then they actually have the power to choose. And so
before we leave, the choice is made.
Well, and I am my desire would be do it right now because I want it cleaned up because the house looks terrible. I'd like it clean. And that would be me holding onto control really tightly. But by me letting go of that control and giving them the option to pick and choose how they want to do it, it's still going to eventually get done, but I'm no longer burdened with this like, oh, do it my way or else. And then I get this anger welling up inside me. They get to pick. And I'd much rather have that be the case.
That's a great point. And then they feel empowered because they're
in control of how they want it to go.
But like you said, the outcome's the same.
Outcome's the same.
The outcome's the same. That's awesome. Love that. Another one is, and boy, this is a tough one. Model healthy behavior. Yeah. I mean, how many times I've just called myself, hey, you do not raise your voice to your brother. You're just
yell about not yelling.
I'm yelling about yelling. It's cliche, but it's true. Things are not taught; they're caught from us. And so, what is that behavior that you're trying to control? And then ask yourself, hey, am I modeling this for my kid? Are my kids seeing this?
I think of it in terms of like the steering wheel. Like when I'm driving the car, like I got to grip this steering wheel. I'm in control of this car. I'm holding on really tightly. And that's fine for driving. But for like interpersonal relationships and parenting, like I want to let go and live loosely, because there's so much in life that we're not actually in control of. We're not really in control of our long-term health. We can try to eat healthy. You can still get cancer. You're not really in control of how someone speaks to you today. Like you could say something nice and they could just curse you out. And there's nothing you can do about that. Yeah. There's so few things we actually have control over. And I think that if we give this impression that we have to hold so tightly to have control over things, you're actually setting your kids up for future pain, because they're going to try to do the same thing you're doing. Mm-hmm. If you model this loose life, this loose behavior, say, okay, I can't control so much, but I'm just going to handle me, then they'll probably do the same as they get a little bit older. That's what I want. I don't want them to live in this tension. I don't want them to feel like they've got to, grip so tightly to life. Live like this. And I think you're going to have a lot more success.
That's really good. I think there's certain personality types of kids too that, boy, they really don't like the sense of you being controlling, and so you're going, ooh, which of my kids do I resonate with more when it comes to being controlling? But I think I
think there's also, kids that thrive under, there's people that thrive under a sense of having a grip on something or a sense of control. And they tend, honestly, they can kind of even tend to be in their element in that way, and so there's ways, I think there's ways about it. I don't want to be so controlling that I'm squashing how my kid best reacts to things or how they best work within the confines of whatever this is going on or whatnot, like that. Like, I don't want to completely shift how my kid works. But I also want to be able to maybe even point out, like, that's not the best way to do that. Yeah.
Well, I think dads who have, kind of like myself, I would hope that I fall into this category. You can have a dad who's controlling because he just wants to be in power. That's not what I want to be. But you can also have or be like my way or the highway. That's one kind of controlling. Another kind of controlling is, I love you so much, I want what's best for you. And so I feel like if I have my hands on the controls, that I can actually steer you towards what I think is best for you. And I don't think that's a totally negative thing. That means I'm trying to do things that are out of love that are going to help you. I think that's a good kind of controlling, but even taking that too far can have a counter effect.
Helicopter parent.
Yeah. When the COVID pandemic came along a couple years ago, whatever it was, I think so many people had their eyes open to the fact that you have so much less control over things than you thought you did. Right. And so this bleeds over into parenting. Like, you have that one interaction with that one kid and you say, hey, it's time for dinner. And they look you in the eye and they plop on the ground like, no, it's not. And you're like, I guess I don't have as much control over this as I thought I did. Like, we have to get comfortable with not having control. And that's really hard because when you have the buttons pushed the way you want them to be pushed, you feel better about yourself. Yeah. It's not going to work that way. And we got to be good at, as dads, of just like being okay with that.
Well, and just being okay with not controlling not only your kid, but just life. I travel a lot and I watch people so frustrated about lines and delayed flights and traffic. And you're going, talking about futile. Like, this makes no sense. And when a kid sees how we respond to things that are out of our control, like, I think they in terms of modeling that behavior, they tend to.
Well, and I want to say something to that. I don't want to be okay with some of the stuff, but I do want to be understanding of it.
Yeah.
Like, that's a better way to say it. I don't want to say like, my son's disobedience I'm okay with. I'm not okay with it, but I'm understanding of it.
That's a much better way to say it. Yeah.
I get it. I'm disobedient a lot of times. And so, but it's how are you going to react in that moment? Is it appropriate to say, no, son, get up and control that moment? I think sometimes it is because, and again, it depends on the individual kid, but if my kid, just because I know them, if they were being disobedient like that, I feel like I would have to actually come in and control that a little bit, because that's way out of the norm of behavior to a certain degree that I guess for me, it's more like not trying to control, but I'm trying to do some investigative work here. What's really going on? Why are you being so this way and not normal?
That's good. Yeah. We're going to do an episode on helping our kids build emotional muscles. And we talk a little bit about that. Yeah. About we're not letting go, right? Yeah. We're not letting free for all. We're just talking about it to them in a different way. Yeah. Another thing that's super important when it comes to being controlling, and I think if there's common themes on the podcast, this is one of them, is to pause and slow down.
Slow down. Yeah.
I mean, when we're controlling, again, we're in the emotional part of our brain. We're not in the logical part of our brain that hopefully we're in right now as we're talking about this. It's just, I need to give myself some space. I need to give space before controlling. I mean, obviously there's times when, especially you have littles, I've got to protect them. I've got to control this situation. We're not talking about those things.
Safety or whatever.
Safety. But those, most times we're like, I need to think about this.
Well, it's it's the times when our kid does something and it feels like it's hitting an open wound or an exposed nerve. You want to react, you want to snap or something like that. Right. But there might be a wince, but wait, calm.
Right.
Then respond, react, whatever, in the appropriate amount of time. Yeah, I get that.
And I may have shared this on the podcast before, but one of the things the counselor told us about our adopted daughter, she says, because she was just doing things where I was like, I had never experienced this before. As a dad, I didn't know what to do. What is happening? I don't have any context. She says, what still makes you seem in control, what still seems to go that you're the adult here, that you're the parent here, is she says, you just go, I'm going to need to think about this. And she goes, she doesn't want you thinking. And so it has been one of the most powerful things with her. I don't know about if it would work with the other ones, but with her, it's been, I want to need to think about this, because she talking about triggers.
Your other kid's like, think along, old man. Go right ahead.
Great, but with her, I'm going to need to think about that. But it's just, again, it's slowing down. Another one, and this can be our final one of this episode, is choose your battles. The less you try to control, the less controlling you will be. What are those things you're going, why am I trying to control this? With my kids right now going, do I really even need to control this situation? Or is this, why am I trying to control it? And just slowing that down, choosing battles. For us, one of the battles that we decided to just stop, and I'm not saying anybody listening, this needs to be a battle if this is important to you, was what their rooms look like. My wife, it's very neat. She's a decorator type of person. And so our house, it's the look and feel is very important to her. And their nurseries look like Pottery Barn ads. And nice. Then
awesome. I love that.
And she kept that. And that was going until they hit adolescence. And they're like, whoa. I want to put, when they said I want to put posters on the wall.
Excuse me.
It was a dark day of the soul for her.
Posters of who? Because that'll determine.
Yeah, now that I have control over. Okay, but it was one of those things you'd walk in and it would be messy, or you'd walk in and they'd mess something up. And for us, we're like, you know what? We're going to let that go, because the older they got, the busier they got, and so we would spend this precious time with them going. One, it was keeping them in their room, trying to get, and I want to spend time with them. So for us, we chose to stop fighting that battle. Now, when I go see my boys' apartments, I maybe should have fought it a little harder.
I was going to say, I've been fighting this battle.
Researchers need to come in and figure out what's going on in the bathroom.
This is a pigsty.
And I'm like, oh, maybe I should have. What is
I have
that battle?
decided to fight that exact battle because we have an infestation of ants in my son's room. I'm like, son, what in the world happened? He goes, I don't know. I'm like, there's food under your dresser. Like, you're not supposed to eat it. Like, that's why there's a bajillion ants in here.
Open can of
what
Pringles
are you
under there,
doing?
kid.
This is a battle I'm deciding to fight today. So,
Well, and I think, like, even for me, coming home yesterday, I'm noticing my kid's not right or not normal. And I'm kind of checking in with my wife of like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, I don't know, you know? And so she even said yesterday, she goes, I'm just picking my battles because, you know, and it's knowing your kid, understanding how they work and knowing when they're off. And it's like, do I really want to pick a battle when my kid's off?
Oh, that's
You know
a good
what I mean?
point.
And so when they're off their game, that means a lot of times they're going to go rogue.
yeah,
You know,
that's good.
and it's not going to be a good situation for anybody, you know? And so it's really just kind of picking your battles, knowing like,
this
So you're talking about
might not be
you're
the
talking
day.
about when to, that's good. Like when to pick your battles. That's a great point. I know, like with couples, I'll say, don't talk about anything important before 9 a.m. or after 9 p.m. It's not a good time.
Yeah.
It's not a good time.
Yeah.
But that's a great point, Buck. I love that.
This is a big one for me because my big concern is someone who knows that he has a tendency to be controlling as a parent and just wants to be in control of things. I know that if I am trying to grab control in the present, that could sacrifice respect for my kids in the future. You know, I don't want to be someone who was looked at as this.
Bobby, that dog a hunt right there.
Well,
Bobby, say that again.
Well, if I'm trying to grab control of them right now in the present, I don't want to risk losing their respect in the future. I don't want to be a dad who was ruling with an iron fist over every little thing because I just wanted to have this semblance of control over my home that later on down the line, they're like, yeah, that dictator, I don't want to be anything like him. I don't even want to call him on Father's Day. Man, if I get controlling wrong now, how sad is future Bobby going to be?
Yeah. And in my head, I'm a huge visual person of like, I see it, but as the difference between like a dictator, like you said, or like a prison warden, and comparatively to a beloved king, you know, or something like that, you know. But like a king or a person, a ruler that knows intimately their people,
The
and
people love
how
that
they
king
flourish,
back.
and they want to give respect back, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yes. And
Love your family well.
The older they get, and depending on the kid, you know, you start loosening that up because none of us as adults want to be around controlling people. Like we don't want to be controlled.
It's the worst.
So as we're letting them go, we've got to let go of that control because I want them to come home. I really like them. Like I really love them, and I really want to be around them. So the older they get, they go, I can't control you. I can coach you a little bit at this stage, but I just love them, and people want to be around people that love them instead of controlling.
Love them well.
Love them well. I think the bottom line for this one is you can't control your child's behavior, but you can control your own.
Oh, for sure.
And how we interact with them. Bobby, what's our pro move?
Pro move of the week is ask yourself, what is one area where you need to be less controlling with your kid? This may take some deep diving in your soul. Maybe, you know, you're like me and you don't realize you're doing it as much as you're doing it. But think about this deeply. What's one area you want to be less controlling? Do it this week.
That's good.
Nice.
That's good stuff. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening. We hope that you and your kid will be glad you did. Thanks for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the All Pro Dad Play of the Day, by going to allprodad.com/subscribe and get daily powerful and practical fatherhood tips in your inbox. The All Pro Dad podcast is hosted by me, Ted Lowe, produced by Bobby Lewis.